She built a career on noticing what others missed. Tiny changes in skin. Subtle shifts in texture. The difference between something harmless and something dangerous. That was her strength. That was her identity. But in the middle of filming, while cameras were rolling and patients waited just a few feet away, Dr. Sandra Lee almost missed something far more serious happening inside her own body. And here's where it gets unsettling. What she thought was just another exhausting workday was actually the beginning of a stroke. It started in her clinic in Upland, California. A normal day on the surface. Lights on. Crew members moving through hallways. Patients traveling from across the country just to see her. By then, she wasn't just a dermatologist anymore. She was Dr. Pimple Popper. A global name. Millions of followers. A TV series. A booming business. Every minute of her day was scheduled, filmed, and shared. But then something changed. And at first, it didn't look like anything serious. She felt overheated. Not dramatic. Not alarming. Just wrong. Her thoughts started to feel cloudy. Her body slightly detached, like it wasn't fully syncing with her mind. But she didn't stop. She kept filming. Kept seeing patients. Kept moving through the day like so many high-performing people do when something feels off, but not enough to justify stopping everything. And here's the question that changes everything. How often do we ignore signals like that? Because later, after doctors confirmed she had suffered an ischemic stroke, she would look back at those early signs differently. The heat. The fog. The discomfort. None of it matched the dramatic version of a stroke most people imagine. And that matters, especially because in many women, stroke symptoms don't always arrive in the textbook way. Sometimes it's fatigue, confusion, sweating, restlessness, easy to dismiss, easy to explain away. But what happens when just stress is actually something far more dangerous? That's exactly what she did. She minimized it. That word became crucial. Maybe it was stress. Maybe a hot flash. Maybe exhaustion. Maybe she just needed rest. Each explanation felt reasonable in isolation. But together, they delayed the truth. And that's the dangerous part. Because the human brain is very good at normalizing warning signs when life is too busy to stop. That evening, she went to see her parents. And things escalated. Sharp pain ran through her legs. Walking downstairs felt strange, like her body wasn't responding correctly. Not weakness exactly. More like disconnection. As if the signal between brain and body was slipping. And here's where it starts to feel serious, because that kind of change doesn't usually come and go without consequence. She didn't sleep that night. By morning, everything shifted. She looked at her left hand and realized she couldn't fully control it. Then she tried to speak. Her words came out slurred, distorted. Suddenly, the explanation she had been avoiding became unavoidable. Stroke. And here's the part that makes this even harder to process. She wasn't just anyone. She was a physician. Someone trained to recognize exactly these signs. Face changes. Arm weakness. Speech problems. She knew the checklist. She knew what minutes meant in this situation. And still, her mind tried to bargain with reality, just like anyone else might. Wait. Maybe it will pass. Maybe it's nothing. Maybe I'm overreacting. That internal negotiation is dangerous in a medical emergency, because it slows everything down at the exact moment speed matters most. But she wasn't alone in the decision that followed. Her father, also a doctor, saw her and didn't hesitate. He told her to go to the emergency room immediately. No discussion. No delay. And that moment may have changed everything that came after. The MRI confirmed it. An ischemic stroke. A blood clot had cut off oxygen to part of her brain. And when doctors talk about this kind of event, they are very precise. Because every minute matters. Millions of brain cells can die in a very short time when oxygen is blocked. And here's the sentence that lands like a shockwave. Part of her brain had died. Short. Clinical. Final. But for someone whose entire life depended on precision, control, and fine motor skill, it meant something far bigger. Her hands were her career. Her identity. Her public presence. And now one of them didn't feel like it belonged to her anymore. Afterward, the reality of her life came into focus in a different way. High blood pressure. Elevated cholesterol. Long work hours. Constant production schedules. Stress layered on top of stress. None of it felt urgent in isolation. But together, it built a picture she hadn't fully seen until everything stopped. Filming halted. Television paused. Procedures stopped. A production machine built around one person suddenly had to slow down. And here's the strange part. When someone's entire career is built on fixing other people's problems, what happens when they become the patient instead? But to really understand this story, you have to go back further. Before fame. Before television. Before YouTube. Back to her father in Malaysia, working in a rural clinic with limited resources. He didn't have advanced tools. Just a borrowed dermatology book. He would study behind a curtain between patients, trying to identify conditions page by page. Quiet. Focused. Improvising with what he had. And somehow, from that environment, a future was already forming. Years later, his daughter would step into the same field. But her path wasn't smooth. She actually failed to match into dermatology residency at first. A rejection that could have ended everything. And here's the twist. That setback became one of the most important turning points of her life. Because she didn't stop. She pivoted. Tried again. Eventually succeeded. Completed her training. Took over her father's practice in Southern California. And then, almost quietly at first, she uploaded her first YouTube videos in 2010. At the beginning, almost no one watched. The content was simple. Educational. Clinical. But then something unexpected happened. One type of procedure started drawing massive attention. Blackhead extractions. People couldn't look away. Millions watched. Some in fascination. Some in discomfort. But they kept watching. And that changed everything. Suddenly, she wasn't just a doctor. She was a media phenomenon. A television series followed. Brand deals. Public appearances. Business expansion. The pace of her life accelerated until it barely had room to breathe. And here's the question that starts to form. When does success start turning into strain? Because the body keeps score long before it ever stops you. Over time, the pressure built. Work expanded. Filming increased. Travel increased. Responsibility increased. Until eventually, her body forced a halt. Recovery took months. Basic movement became difficult. Walking required focus. Speaking felt different. And her left hand, the very tool she relied on every day, no longer felt fully reliable. And that's where the fear sets in. Not just fear of illness, but fear of identity collapse. Because what happens when the thing you've mastered your entire life suddenly feels unfamiliar? When she eventually returned to work, nothing looked different on the outside. Same clinic. Same cameras. Same procedures. But internally, everything had changed. Every movement carried awareness now. Every sensation had meaning. Because once you've experienced how quickly normal can disappear, you never fully trust it again.